You repotted your plant a few weeks ago. You chose a larger pot. You added fresh soil. For the first few days, it looked hopeful. The leaves stood up a little taller. The soil looked rich and dark. It felt like progress. But now, several weeks later, the plant still looks slow. Maybe the leaves are drooping again. Maybe growth has paused. You keep waiting for that strong burst of new leaves, but it does not come. If this feels familiar, you're not doing anything wrong. I have seen this pattern many times over the years. Many careful gardeners move their plant into a bigger home, expecting faster growth. Yet weeks pass, and the plant seems stuck. The surprise is this. The real issue may not be the pot being too small before. It may be the new pot being too big before. Explaining why this worked against you, it helps to understand how this idea became so common. Most gardeners believe that a bigger pot gives roots more room, and more room means more growth. It sounds logical. If a plant looks cramped, we assume it needs space. Garden centers often recommend moving up to a larger container in spring. Online advice repeats the same message. When we see roots near the bottom of a pot, we feel it is time to upgrade. The idea feels kind and generous. We want to give the plant more than enough space. We imagine the roots stretching out freely, taking in nutrients, and pushing out strong, new leaves. And sometimes, moving to a slightly larger pot does help. That is why the advice continues to spread. But the detail that often gets missed is how much larger the new pot should be. That small detail changes everything. To understand why, we need to look below the soil surface. We do not see the roots every day. But that is where most of the real story happens. When you repot a plant, even gently, the roots feel it. Some fine root hairs break. The plant pauses for a short time to recover. This is normal. It is called transplant stress. In small amounts, it is not harmful. The plant adjusts. Now imagine those recovering roots sitting inside a large space filled with fresh, damp soil. The roots are still small compared to the new container. They cannot reach most of the moisture around them, so that extra soil stays wet longer than expected. Roots need water, but they also need air. Tiny spaces in the soil hold oxygen. When soil stays wet for too long, those air spaces fill with water. The roots cannot breathe as well. Growth slows quietly, not because the plant lacks space, but because the balance underground has changed. This is the part many people do not realize. The mistake is not repotting itself. The mistake is oversizing the pot too quickly. When a pot is much larger than the root ball, most of the soil around the edges stays damp for days, sometimes even longer in cooler homes. The roots sit in a zone that feels heavy and wet. They do not expand quickly enough to use all that moisture, so instead of growing faster, they slow down. It is not dramatic. There is no sudden collapse. The plant simply looks tired. Leaves may lose their shine. New growth may pause. You might think it needs fertilizer, but often, the roots are simply waiting for better balance. Cause and effect here is gentle but steady. Too much wet soil leads to less oxygen. Less oxygen leads to slower root activity. Slower roots means slower leaves. Once you understand this, you start to see small signs. One sign is soil that feels wet even a week after watering. You touch the surface, and it still feels cool and damp. Another sign is growth that seems frozen. The plant does not decline sharply. It just does not move forward. You may also notice yellowing on the lower leaves. Not all at once, just one or two at a time. This can happen because the roots are not taking up nutrients efficiently in overly wet soil. If you see this, do not blame yourself. Many beginners and experienced gardeners alike have done the same thing. The plant is not fragile. It is simply adjusting to conditions that are a little too generous. Climate also plays a quiet role in this story. In cooler regions or in homes that stay cool most of the year, soil dries slowly. A large pot in a cool room can stay wet much longer than expected. In these cases, oversizing a container can affect growth more strongly. In warmer regions or during hot summers, soil dries faster. A slightly larger pot may not cause as much delay. The extra warmth helps moisture evaporate. But even in warm climates, a very large jump in pot size can still slow things down. Light also matters. In low light, plants use less water. So in darker rooms, large pots stay wet longer. In bright light, plants drink more and soil dries more evenly. This is why the same advice does not fit every home. Observation becomes more important than rules. Now, it is also true that sometimes a plant really does need a new pot. Roots can circle tightly at the bottom. They can press so firmly against the sides that water runs straight through without soaking in. In those cases, growth slows because the plant truly has no space left. If you gently slide a plant out and see thick roots wrapping around in tight loops, that is a sign it may benefit from more room. If watering becomes difficult because the soil dries out too quickly, that is another clue. Repotting is not the enemy. The size of the jump is what matters. A small increase gives roots a manageable amount of new soil to explore. They fill it gradually. As they expand, they use water more evenly. The balance between air and moisture stays stable. A very large increase creates a wide ring of unused soil. That soil behaves differently than the small root ball in the center. It holds moisture longer. The roots lag behind. Over time, this difference affects the whole plant. So what is the gentle approach? Think in small steps. If your current pot is 8 inches wide, moving to 9 or 10 inches is often enough. Just 1 or 2 inches wider. That small change feels modest, but underground it makes a meaningful difference. The roots can reach the edges sooner. They claim the new soil. They create balance more quickly. You do not need to rush the process. Plants grow at their own pace. For many houseplants, staying slightly snug in their pot does not harm them. In fact, a slightly full pot often dries at a steady rate. Water moves through it predictably. The roots stay active. This approach also reduces effort. You are not lifting very large containers. You are not constantly adjusting watering routines. You are allowing the plant to guide you. If you recently repotted into a much larger container and growth has slowed, the solution is often patience. As long as the plant is not declining quickly, it may simply need time to grow into its space. Avoid adding extra fertilizer in hopes of forcing growth. That can create new stress. Instead, observe the soil. Notice how long it stays wet. Adjust, watering gently. Let the top layer dry before watering again. Give the roots a chance to breathe. If you are unsure about your own situation, you might take a quiet moment to look at one of your plants today. Notice the pot size. Notice how the soil feels. There is no need to change anything immediately. Just observe. If you feel comfortable, you can share in the comments what plant you are growing and whether your home is warm or cool most of the year. Sometimes hearing from others in similar climates can bring clarity. There is no rush, just conversation. In the end, healthy growth often comes from restraint. We want to help our plants by giving more space, more soil, more attention. But plants often respond best to balance. A slightly smaller step, a steady rhythm of watering, a pot that fits just a little snug. When you reduce excess, roots strengthen. When roots strengthen, leaves follow. Do less, get more.